So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Grad School 101 info session for education students at McGill. We're really excited to present this session for you this evening, and if you're watching back on YouTube, welcome. So today I'm going to start off with a short presentation about grad school, your decision-making process, whether you should, pursue grad school right now or not. And then we will talk about tackling the application, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end with Tianna, who's a MA Educational Leadership student, and she's going to share her thoughts and opinions on what's it like actually to be a graduate student right now at McGill. All right. So at the end of the session, you should be able to identify key considerations to use when deciding whether to attend graduate school and how to choose which schools to apply to. You'll be able to identify typical application procedures and the standard components of different applications. And then finally, I'll be sharing some strategies for organizing your applications and promoting yourself as a competitive applicant. Okay. So whether you're graduating soon or in a few years, you're going to learn something and you're going to be better informed about the graduate school application process. So before I move any further, I just want to ask you to kind of jot down on a piece of paper or a new note on your phone and ask yourself, why do you want to go to grad school, right? So that could be one reason, it could be multiple reasons, but I want you to think about that critically for a moment, okay? There's a lot of different reasons, obviously, to pursue graduate studies, right? And I think you want to delve deeper into that decision because it's a huge investment in not only time, but also, tuition costs, delaying, earning an income, that kind of thing, potentially. So you really want to critically evaluate whether this is the right step for you right now. Maybe it's something you want to put off, or maybe it's something that you're not really that interested in at all, right? So we're going to talk about kind of like, is it for the right reasons? We're going to talk about what reasons those might be. You might also want to think about your long-term career goals, right? So will this graduate program or will grad school assist you in meeting those goals? Something, for example, like if you wanted to become a guidance counselor or a speech language pathologist, you're pretty much unable to do that unless you pursue further education and you do a graduate program, right? Thinking about what you want to specialize in, what are your interests? Another question is, were you a good student when you were an undergrad? Were things quite easy for you? Did you struggle a lot? Because graduate school is a lot harder in terms of academic rigor than undergrad. So you want to ask yourself, are you willing to work that much harder than you did in your undergrad degree? You want to ask if you have the motivation for another 2 to 7 years of school. So a lot of our undergraduate students in the Faculty of Education, you've been in school pretty much nonstop since kindergarten. So that's, probably at least 15 years. So thinking about, do you have the drive to continue doing this right now? Do you want to maybe take a pause and revisit it when you have a bit more time and energy, right? Another question, can you afford grad school? Is it something that's financially feasible right now? Are you living on your own? Do you need to, work in order to pay your rent, your utilities, all your expenses? Because again, it's going to delay potentially some of your earning potential if you go to graduate school right away, right? Do you have the academic and personal qualities to succeed? So that's maybe something we'll ask Tianna a little bit about at the end is, there's certain individuals who thrive in grad school and others who might not necessarily do that, especially if you're in a thesis program and you need to be self-motivated in order to achieve your goals in the program. You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success, right? And then the final question you want to ask yourself is, are you doing this because you don't know what else to do, right? So again, if this seems just like the easy choice, the easy next step, you might want to revisit that and think more critically about why you're making this decision. All right, so there are some positive reasons for going to graduate school. So you have an interest in lifelong learning, you have a desire to advance or transition your career, you have an interest in research opportunities, you have a strong pull towards something you want to learn more about. So maybe, your undergraduate degree, you felt like you just scratched the surface on a certain topic and you really want to pursue a thesis or a master's program in order to delve a lot deeper into it, right? That's, a lot of students' main motivation for going into graduate studies. Again, perhaps the graduate degree that you're pursuing is required for a particular career goal that you have, or it might provide you with more upward career mobility. Okay, so these are all positive reasons. And then on the flip side, there are some reasons to think more about. So again, if you're just uncertain about what next to do, you're feeling uncomfortable, transitioning from your pretty much lifelong role of being a student into, going into the workforce, and you want to delay that a bit because you're anxious, I don't think that that's the right motivation for graduate school, right? It might feel like everyone else is going to grad school, which is not actually the case. I know, especially at McGill, it might seem like all your peers are doing it, but in reality, McGill does collect statistics on this, and fewer than 50% of McGill students go on to higher education. So, especially teachers, especially because you're, finishing with a B.Ed degree, you're pretty much ready for the workforce right away, right? Again, you're feeling like you're struggling to find a job, so you're like, you know what? I'm gonna just go back to school. Again, maybe not the best reason. You don't feel ready to start working, or the belief that a graduate degree is necessary in order to get a better job or any job. Okay. So there are a lot of students who, go right away versus maybe taking a little bit of a break, pursuing a career a little bit, and then coming back. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the distinctions with those options, and you can kind of determine for yourself what fits your situation best, right? So if you wanted to do grad school right away, obviously, the subject material is still fresh. You've just finished your undergrad degree, so you know what it's like to be in school mode. You're used to papers, exams, a student budget, and you might still have a strong rapport with your professors and can easily obtain letters of reference, right? So that's obviously some nice bonuses to do it right away. However, it's also really normal to take a break, so you can gain knowledge about your future career options. Finishing your undergrad degree, taking a year off, taking 2 years off, you're going to gain some perspective and understand, what graduate program might suit you best, or what graduate experience might suit you best, right? A thesis, a professional program, one that's course-based. Again, there's lots of different options that we're going to discuss in a moment. Oftentimes as well, if you take a break and you do some work, you're bringing that life experience to your next degree. You're maybe able to delve deeper into certain topics. You might also, if it's a graduate program that requires some type of exam like the GRE or the MCAT for med school, you'll have time to study for that and dedicate time in order to best prepare for those exams. It also gives you a chance to earn and save money. Sometimes work experience is required for the program. So an MBA, for example, a Master's of Business Administration, oftentimes you need to have 2 years minimum work experience in order to be accepted. And I believe for our educational leadership program at McGill as well, they want you to have 2 years of relevant leadership experience. So you want to think about that too. And then finally, if you take a gap and you work a little bit, then obviously you're building your CV and you're adding experience to your CV, which will improve your career prospects in the long run. So there are a lot of different types of degrees at the graduate level, everything from a postgraduate certificate or diploma, a professional degree or master's, a non-thesis, a thesis, master's, or a doctorate. So here's just a visual representation of the differences between these types of programs. So a graduate certificate or diploma is usually a very short degree that kind of adds and gives you a bit of a specialization on top of your Bachelor of Education or Bachelor of Arts. It's 1 to 2 years. Oftentimes it's focused on coursework, but it could include a practicum component, and it's highly specialized content. So some examples at McGill would be the certificate in inclusive education, certificate in French immersion teaching, certificate in teaching English as a second language. So those are kind of like bonus little add-ons that you can do on top of your degree at McGill. If you look at other universities or if you go to the McGill School of Continuing Studies, you can often come from a variety of backgrounds into shorter certificate programs. So something like a degree in certificate in communications, a certificate in human resources, certificates in lots of other different sectors and things that are going to help prepare you for a particular type of career. If you're looking at a master's non-thesis or a master's professional, typically that's 1 to 3 years. You're doing a lot of coursework. You may be doing a practicum experience or doing an applied project. Okay, so it's not as much research. It's not going to be as big as a thesis, but a non-thesis or a professional master's program is still going to help boost your career prospects. So a thesis program, it's often, you're doing some coursework, but then a lot of it is independent research and study with your supervisor, and it can take between 2 to 3 years. It may be less theoretical, more research-based, and again, may or may not include a practicum experience. And from there, oftentimes, if you want to do a doctorate or a PhD, it's recommended that you would do a master's thesis program first versus a non-thesis program because they want you to have demonstrated that you have research experience, right? So a doctorate could take up to 4 to 7 years. Some coursework, there might be exams. You're going to be writing an original research dissertation, and you can either start a PhD in one of two ways upon completion of a master's, or you can request an integrated or fast-track PhD, where you might start in a master's program and that thesis question gets so big and so complicated that you work with your supervisor to turn that into a PhD. So I hope you now have a good overview of the different graduate level programs that are available in Canada. So some considerations for choosing a graduate school, you might want to look at the program again. Are you thinking about research? Are you looking at thesis? Would you rather just take some courses, delve deeper into topics, or do a project? From there, you want to look at, the university, the department, the supervisors that are available and are accepting graduate students. Sometimes there are certain professors that don't have any more space in the research teams or don't have enough extra time to dedicate to new graduate students. So you want to make sure that whatever your interests are, especially for thesis, there's someone available to help guide you in that process, right? You might want to think about locations. So maybe you've done all of your studies in Montreal so far, and you want to think about somewhere else to go and live and experience a new lifestyle, a new culture. Thinking about, are you going to be able, if you need to, find job opportunities like part-time jobs to help supplement your studies and your tuition and that kind of thing. What's the cost of living there? Is it really expensive? Is it something that's going to be a bit more affordable? So that location is something you want to think about before picking a grad school. The admission requirements. So we're going to talk a little bit about what different universities do and how applications could be vastly different even within one organization. And you want to look at the admission requirements. Do you have the prerequisite courses? Do you have the minimum GPA that they're asking for? Are you going to be able to find good letters of reference? So taking a look at that might help sway your decision as well. And then again, costs and available funding. Are you going to have access to apply for scholarships, to apply for graduate funding, that kind of thing? Okay. So taking a look now, how are you going to conduct this research? I've told you to go do your research, but now I'm going to tell you the tools that you can use in order to do that. First and foremost, go on that university's website, poke around, read every page that you possibly can about that graduate program. And if you're interested in research and you're looking at specific supervisors or professors, you might want to read journal articles by them, academic reviews, get to know their work and their research, right? If school rankings are important to you, you can take a look at school rankings online. So in Canada, for example, Maclean's does this university ranking every year. You could take a look there. You could take a look at how individual departments are ranked, again, within Canada or globally. Find professor bios and their CVs, again, to see if they align with your research or your course interests. You may want to contact former or current students to ask about their experience. As much as websites can be really flashy and do a really good job marketing and selling a program to you, sometimes what that program offers in reality may not live up to this really fancy website. So I've always recommend when students come and ask me about graduate programs, have you talked to a current student, or can you try and reach out to a former student? Can you find someone on LinkedIn that you can connect with and ask them about their student experience in that graduate program, right? Sometimes after those conversations, the student changes their mind and says, you know what, after I talk to someone, I don't think it's the right program for me. I don't think, what the website says and what it is in reality really match up. Okay. And then finally, you can use the LinkedIn alumni tool, again, to look up certain people who have finished those programs and contact them and ask them about their experiences. So here are some options to consider in Montreal after your B.Ed or your B.A. Ed. So there are some programs that are professional programs, like counseling psychology, speech language pathology. But for those programs, you often need some extra prerequisite courses. So keep that in mind, that you might need to re-enroll at McGill as a special status student, take those prerequisite courses before you're even eligible to apply to those programs, right? Some programs ask for professional experience, like the MA in Child Studies at Concordia. You need minimum 1 year of full-time work experience before you apply there. And then, you may directly qualify for some programs. So there's the MA Education and Society at McGill, the MA Educational Technology at Concordia, or the MEd in Orthopedagogy at UDM. So all of those you can qualify for directly if you are finishing a degree at the Faculty of Education. This list is not obviously comprehensive. There's a lot more programs out there, but I'm just giving you some examples of, thesis programs, professional programs, and non-thesis programs. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about applications and what that looks like. It's important for you to understand that the application for grad school is a lot more involved and has a lot more puzzle pieces than undergraduate applications, right? So obviously these things will vary depending on which school or which program or department you're applying to. But generally speaking, the things on the left column are pretty non-negotiable. There's some things that are generally included in that application. So something like an application fee. Again, if you're applying to 10 schools, are you right now, going to be able to financially afford 10 application fees, right? Often these fees range from anywhere between $50 to $150, okay? There's some standardized forms you have to fill out. They're obviously going to ask for your official university transcripts, sometimes even CEGEP's transcripts as well. And if you've done a study abroad or you've started your degree elsewhere and then you finish it at McGill, you're going to have to track down all your transcripts and send all of them to the graduate program you're interested in. Most programs ask for a personal statement or letter of intent. So often it's like either a limited by a word count or a page count where you're talking about who you are, your motivations for this program and that kind of thing. And then there could be letters of recommendation that schools ask for. So you're going to have to ask, your professors, your course instructors, who are going to be able to write, Lara is prepared for graduate school because, XYZ reason, right? They're going to be looking at your CV, and your academic CV is quite different than the CV you use for job search. For job search, you want to make it as short and tailored as possible and really just tell the employer the transferable skills that you have for that industry. But your academic CV can be as long as it needs to be. Again, obviously, if the application specifies a page limit, you want to follow that. But oftentimes, if it's open-ended, you could have multiple pages because they really want to know absolutely everything that you've done. Okay. And on the right-hand side, there are some additional components that may be required. So sometimes there's an interview. Sometimes you have to identify a research supervisor in advance. If it's, for example, for the art education master's program at Concordia, you need to submit a portfolio of art. Sometimes for English Lit, they want writing samples. There could be a test, there could be an English proficiency exam or study permits, student visas if you're looking at programs out of country. So your personal statement, I'm going to run through some quick tips for you about this. So it could be called a variety of things: personal statement, statement of purpose, letter of intent, biographical sketch. They all more or less mean the same thing. If there are guiding questions and they're asking certain things of you, you want to make sure you're answering everything that they're asking. You want to concentrate on crafting a strong opening paragraph. You wouldn't believe how many personal statements I've reviewed and read for Faculty of Education students that start with, my name is so-and-so, and I am a current student in this program in the Faculty of Education. It's not incorrect, but it's a very boring introduction. So you want to think about writing something that's a bit more creative, a little that grabs the reader's attention and really encourages them to read further. Overall, in a personal statement, you want to give the reader a sense of who you are. So this is your opportunity to be a storyteller, to be specific, to kind of elaborate on one or several things that are on your CV and really give them a taste of who you are and what your personality is like. One thing I will recommend before you start writing a personal statement, do not Google it first. Do not Google examples of personal statements. I think it's really important to brainstorm your ideas first so that you're not your vision isn't tainted by other people's thoughts or structures or ideas. I think it's important to come up with a vision or a purpose of the statement, maybe going back to the questions at the beginning of this session and thinking about what are your motivations? Is this going to help your career? All those great things, and jot this down. Writing down your goals, and then thinking about which accomplishment and experiences are most relevant that you're going to elaborate on in this personal statement. Okay. Once you have your outline, once you've written a first draft, then by all means, go Google it, go see examples, but I highly encourage you not to do that for your first draft. Try not to be repetitive. So again, certain personal statements I read kind of like a list. They just say, I'm prepared for this graduate program because A, B, C, D, E, and all of those things are already on the CV. So again, it's your chance to be a storyteller. There are some other ideas you could include. So describe what you know about the field, its future, how you're going to contribute to that future, that kind of thing, and then showcase your research about the school as well. Overall, the main purpose is it's a sample of your writing, right? They want to see if you can write well at a graduate level. So it's important to write well and correctly. I highly recommend you get feedback, have it reviewed by a career advisor, a professor, a friend, or a family member who's actually going to read it and give you constructive feedback on what to improve. So letters of recommendation, again, typically 3 letters are needed. Depends on the program though, so you want to double check. Sometimes they're all academic, sometimes it's a mixture of academic or professional people who know you from work experiences or field experiences. And please don't be afraid to ask professors. So there are kind of 3 main facets of what professors do at a university. The first one is teach, the second one is research, and third is, acts of community service or acts to the faculty, service to the faculty. So they understand that every year they're going to be asked for these letters of reference. So don't be shy to write them an email and ask for this. I will say though, allow at least for 4 weeks minimum. Ideally, the more time, the better. I often recommend 8 weeks. But if you're looking at applications now for January, then you're kind of cutting it close. So you want to definitely make your decision and let them know right away. Okay. Oftentimes, it's really helpful if you provide clear and specific instructions for the referees. So list the schools that you're applying to, the deadlines, how it's going to be submitted. You can guide the writer to specific points you want them to include. So if your personal statement is focused really on 3 main ideas, then you might want to say, hey, I'm focusing my personal statement on these 3 main ideas. Can you please incorporate this into your letter, right? They may or may not, but at least they might have an idea of how they can structure their letter for you and make it more unique, okay? They might ask for your unofficial transcript, your CV, or other materials. So you just want to make sure that all of those things are ready before you ask them to submit a reference, okay? And then last but not least, something that's very important, be grateful. Again, obviously this is like kind of part of their job and part of their service to the faculty, but you really want to demonstrate gratitude and send them a thank you email. It goes a long way. So some tips for your application, give yourself enough time. It's a process that is very time consuming, energy consuming. I sometimes meet with students in the summer who are already preparing their applications for the deadlines in January. Make sure you check deadlines for scholarships and funding because sometimes you're applying for scholarships and funding at the same time as you're applying for graduate school. Forge connections, don't necessarily be a hero and do it all on your own. Find a friend who understands what you're going through, maybe someone else who's applying to graduate studies, someone you can commiserate with through the process. But yeah, overall, time I think is the best friend in graduate school applications. Don't leave it to the last minute. Oftentimes students ask me what they can do to strengthen their application. Maybe they didn't get in the first time they applied, or maybe they're just, in their U2 or U3 year, really ramping up and looking to add things to their CV before they graduate. So here are some ways to strengthen your application. The first is to volunteer to assist professors or PhD candidates with their research. Especially if you're interested in a thesis, you're going to see the inner workings of how research is done at the faculty. And that's obviously going to look very good on your CV as well. I'd highly recommend gaining work experience, whether it's part-time, summer internships, something to fill up your CV and to demonstrate your varied skill set. Attend seminars, departmental lectures. This is where you're going to be able to meet and interact with different professors, maybe people who you're not taking courses with. So you definitely want to try and check those out. Find a mentor. So you can find it through the career planning service on campus, McGill Connect. You can reach out to your own people on LinkedIn. Maybe find, again, somebody who's been through that graduate program and who may have some advice to share with you. Meet with program directors or professors from other universities. And then finally, contact recruitment officers or admissions officers. So sometimes I have students coming to visit me and asking me all sorts of questions about very nitty-gritty details about application processes at different universities. I'm not super well versed in that, and I often recommend that they contact admissions directly. They often have a dedicated person whose job it is to respond to questions from prospective students. We have someone like that in our faculty. We have a student recruitment associate, and her job is to contact and have dialogues and answer any questions from any prospective students that want to come and study at the Faculty of Education at McGill. Okay. Just to let you know, there's an upcoming event if you want to shop around for graduate schools coming up on November 6th. It's going to be hosted by the Arts Undergraduate Society and the Science Undergraduate Society, but there may be some options in terms of graduate and professional schools that appeal to Faculty of Education interests as well. So they do recommend that you register for it. So I've included a link here to their website, and then you can register on their page. And I think that's the main overview of what I wanted to talk about today. Now I'm going to ask Tianna to introduce herself and let us know how grad studies are going, and then we'll open it up for the Q&A.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lara, for such a comprehensive and thoughtful presentation. Even though I'm in grad school, I was like, wow, that's such great information. I wish I knew that when I was applying because that was just incredible. So hi, everyone. My name's Tianna. I'm in my second year of the Educational Leadership Masters. I'm currently writing a thesis with Dr. Claudia Mitchell, where we're exploring the gender-based perceptions that elementary school students have on their teachers. I am in my second year of the master's, but I did just finish my undergrad degree with McGill in Bachelor of Education, Kindergarten Elementary. And I've just really been enjoying the master's. I've been loving grad school, and I did jump into it right after I did my undergraduate degrees, so I can definitely answer lots of questions you might have about how I found it, what I've preferred to keep working. I am a substitute teacher with the EMSB as well. Even though I'm completing my master's full time, I've been able to kind of juggle work and school. And yeah, I'm opening it up to you guys if you have any more specific questions. I'm so happy to answer them.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I guess maybe I'll start. I know questions are going to be coming in, but what made you choose a thesis versus a non-thesis master's?
So I was really interested in the idea of research, and this was something that I talked about with a lot of my professors, and they just kind of really showed me how interesting research could be in that the undergraduate degree was a lot more practical, and a lot of the course material that we saw is so different than what I would be looking at in the master's. And so research would let me kind of find my niche and explore it on my own and conduct a study. So even with my own research, I'm going to be able to go into schools and actually work with students to learn more about what's going on in the field. And down the line, I do see myself wanting to complete a PhD. So the thesis option kind of opens that up for me.
Awesome. Thank you. I have someone asking, obviously you went straight from the BEd into the educational leadership program.
Mhm.
So in your opinion, obviously you're not an admissions officer or anything like that. But for that application, it does recommend that you have 2 years of leadership experience, right? So,
Mhm.
what would you say counts as that? And could you give some specific examples?
Yeah, so throughout my undergrad degree, I was actually on the Education Undergraduate Society. So in my final year, I was president. So that was obviously a big leadership role that played a big part in my application. And before that, I was the vice president of finance for the council. And I just really, in my letter, I emphasized how those roles kind of prepared me to want to do a master's in leadership, as well as even looking back on my teaching experiences and other positions that I've held with camp jobs. I all kind of related it and how they really motivated me to want to keep learning and pursue um, more education.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it
Um,
sounds
I,
like you had like a variety of experience that kind of accumulated into those 2 years of leadership
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
I know I've even had a lot of people ask me too, saying like, okay, but you just went straight from the undergrad to the master's. How did you have enough professional experience? And I think it's just the way that you word it in your letter as well, by really emphasizing how much. I mean, we go on 4 placements in the McGill undergrad with education, and I really emphasized the value that that had on me and how I took on a leadership role in the classroom and how those experiences really just impacted me to kind of give me the same level that other applicants might have, even though they have years of experience.
Yeah. Do you find that there are many other students in your program that went straight in from their BEd, or is it a little bit?
There was a small little group of us.
Okay.
I think a lot of people came in with years of experience, but I also met a lot of people that weren't even in education fields, which was really interesting. So they have professional experience from other disciplines, whether that's like a business degree or maybe working in a research lab in the sciences, and now they're here wanting to learn more about education.
Hmm.
Um, so any kind of experience is experience, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're right in saying that it's kind of how you frame it. And if any students are thinking about applying to that one and they want my support in framing that and making, obviously we're not going to embellish your experiences, but we can really focus on the leadership qualities that you gain in those experiences, right?
Mhm.
The other question about kind of thesis, non-thesis, did you have to identify Claudia Mitchell as your supervisor prior to applying?
No. So when I was applying, it had me rate at several professors that I would like to work with. And on McGill's website, there's a really great link where it kind of shows all the professors that you could potentially work with in education and their specific research interests. So I did list Claudia as one of my top professors, but and I actually thought that we would be connected just based on my application, but that was not the case at all. So I did have to reach out to her afterwards. I know a lot of people that did reach out to professors prior to applying or even once they got the acceptance, but I only signed on with Claudia in my first semester. So that was last fall. And I just reached out to her via email. I was paired with an academic advisor, which who is another professor in education. You get paired with them in your first semester to kind of help you find a supervisor and lay down your research goals. And then from there on, you can start working on your thesis. I did know people, though, when they got accepted, they had a professor, they were able to kind of start their work before the semester actually started in the fall.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah. So you had to do the legwork on your own in order to get the person that you wanted to supervise your thesis.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
that's
did,
good to
which is
know.
why it can sometimes be helpful if you know a professor going into it, but that does not mean that it's going to negate your chances of getting in. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and as the semester kind of went on, I found my research niche that I wanted, and it just so happened that Claudia lined up with it perfectly, and
Hmm.
yeah, it worked out really well.
Hmm. Awesome.
So I've gotten
Um,
a couple messages as well.
okay.
So I did choose educational leadership because this program kind of opens it up if I want to be a principal down the line. And that's always been something that I've been considering. So the educational leadership master's with the Faculty of Education would be your best goal. Um, To be a principal, you do not have to do a thesis. You can just do coursework. It just depends on what you prefer. If you want to continue doing research down the line, if you want to do a project, you can choose that option. But ultimately, to be a principal, a thesis isn't recommended or a thesis isn't mandatory. I am hopefully going to complete this in 2 years because I am doing it full time, but there are options if you want to just take it part time. And I believe that can take up to 5 years for the master's. That is for thesis or non-thesis, just based on how you lay out your courses. Um, I also got, so for references, I reached out to a professor that I had for one of my classes. I reached out to, who else? I reached out to several professors to write some letters because I applied to the Masters of Education in Society and Educational Leadership. And I also reached out to my CT, my supervisor from my final placement, or I guess it wasn't final because I hadn't completed it yet. It was my third placement, sorry. Because her and I had worked together a lot and then the school ended up hiring me later on in the year, so I knew that she could kind of have enough information to write a strong letter. And when I was applying and asking these teachers and professors to write my letter, I did send them a paragraph or my letter of intent, just kind of outlining my research interests. Um, I forgot to mention I am in the concentration for gender and women's studies, so that was a big part of my application, and I really wanted to emphasize that with my referees.
Great, thank you. Someone's asking if the Master's in Educational Leadership non-thesis can be completed in 1 year. I don't believe so. I believe it's
No, it
3
is
years.
2 years of coursework at
Yeah.
minimum.
And what does the class schedule look like?
Majority of your classes will be at night. They kind of do this because they anticipate that a lot of the students are full-time teachers or part-time teachers, so you're working during the day. All my classes have been from 5:30 to 8:30. I know a lot of the ed psych classes are maybe 6 to 9, so that's a bit later. Because I am in the gender and women's studies concentration, I had to take a couple under the IGSF. So that's a completely different faculty outside of education. And those classes were during the day. So that was like an 8:30 a.m. class. So because I was substitute teaching, I just had to make sure I wasn't scheduled for days that I had class scheduled.
And speaking of your substitute teaching, how do you find the balance between your kind of substitute teaching
Hmm.
life and your job and earning an income and your graduate studies? Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, so I think right at the beginning, I was very gung-ho and wanting to try and sub as much as I could just because I really enjoyed it. And the school that I was working at constantly had days available for me. But as the semester went on, I had to say no to a lot more days because the work does kind of pick up and you have to make sure that you are giving it your all with your master's. I found myself that I was maybe not working on the readings as much as I wanted to. And ultimately, I'm paying to be in grad school. I know working is very helpful and it's very important, and the income was a huge asset, but ultimately I knew that I needed to kind of devote more time to my research and master's. However, my classes did end in April, so I was able to take on a full-time contract, which was really nice for the end of spring, beginning of summer.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, a lot of folks are able to try and balance their coursework with their day jobs. I think
Mhm.
maybe would you say maybe it's a little easier if you're not doing a thesis, or would it be pretty similar?
I think it's pretty similar, but it also depends on what your goals are. I knew my main focus right now is grad school, and substitute teaching is just kind of a bonus that I'm able to do on the side. Whereas I have some friends that are full-time teachers right now, and the master's is kind of on the side for them. So they're doing it part-time, which means half the classes. Whereas I had 4 classes last semester, my friend had 2 classes, and so she was able to juggle that a bit more while working full-time.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, that's great to know. Did you have any more questions that came in specifically to you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I Okay, so this question, do you specifically need the master's in leadership to become a principal or have an administrative role, or can you do an MA in educational psychology? I want to say that educational leadership is probably preferred. However, I I don't know for certain if they would accept an educational psychology master's.
Yeah, I don't know for certain either. I think that question would
Mhm,
be best suited towards human resources at whatever school board or school you're looking at working at.
mhm. And so the next question, what do you define as leadership experience? And what's the difference between the master's in educational leadership and education in society? So, leadership experience, I was really fortunate enough to have leadership experience with my work in the council, the undergraduate society, as president. So, that was definitely me acting as a leader to my council, to the student body, organizing events, organizing a team. Leadership experience could also be maybe at your work, maybe your part-time job right now that's outside of teaching. Are you a manager? Are you a shift operator? Are you a volunteer? Do you run events? Do you coordinate volunteer experiences? Maybe do you lead a club at a school that you're working at? I think there's many different ways that you can frame leadership experience. Um, and with the educational leadership masters, they don't require leadership experience. It's more so professional experience as well. I think that's also really emphasized, just even being in the field. Because I think the reason why you're kind of doing the masters in leadership is to learn about it, to then pursue a career in leadership. It's not necessarily expected that you've had tons of leadership experience prior to that, from my understanding.
Yeah, but I do think that your exposure to different experiences is going to help you have that kind of life background, I guess, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term, to be able to lead others, right? Because that's kind of the
Mhm.
point of the master's, right? So you
Definitely.
need a good idea of different workplaces, different experiences in order, and a lot of opportunities working with people,
Mhm.
so that you can be an effective leader in the future.
Mhm. So with
Um, yeah,
the
go ahead.
master's in education and society, that one is more targeted at just the general realm of education. So this was where I met a lot of peers that necessarily didn't come from a teaching background. They're more so just interested in the education field, whether that's working with not-for-profits, working with the government, um, working with like various kinds of organizations that also coincide with youth and learning and education. So it just depends on what you kind of want to do post grad. If you have a more specific career goal, let's say if you do want to become a principal down the line, then I would definitely lean more towards the leadership masters. But if you just are curious about education at large, Ed in Society had a great list of electives that I was very jealous of my friends for being able to take. They are very interesting. So that is also something I would recommend. Kind of look at the courses that are offered for the various programs and what you would be able to take, because that could definitely sway you in either direction.
That's a great suggestion to look at the courses specifically. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, So for the educational leadership masters, is it possible to do it entirely online? Um, that I'm not so sure because I personally didn't want to pursue an online degree, so I didn't really look down that route. If it's not at McGill, they might have other options at other universities. Um,
Yeah, there is a Master's of Education that's fully online from U Ottawa.
mhm,
I'll find the link and put it in the chat. And
mhm.
to my understanding, for that one, you don't need letters of recommendation. You can just submit an application, and you can do it at your own pace. So I'll be sure to find that and put it in there. Okay.
Um, For the specific programs that I applied to, I did not have to take an English exam. I just needed to upload the letter of intent. And because I applied directly through McGill, they had access to my transcripts already, which was really wonderful. So I didn't have to access those to send to them. It was just the letter of intent and um, the reference letters from the professors that I had to upload, or they uploaded for me. Sorry.
So on the English exams piece, I think in general, if you've completed an undergraduate degree at an English speaking institution, they're not necessarily going to ask you for another proof of English because you were able to make it through an undergrad in English. I think the reason why I've included it in those requirements is sometimes if you're, you know, studying in a different place and then coming to Canada like for your master's and studying in English for the first time, that's when an English exam might be required. But again, if you're worried about this, you're not quite sure, and you're an international student, just double check with the admissions people, with the student recruitment associate, whoever they have to answer prospective student questions, and they'll be able to clarify that for you based off your situation.
Mhm. So this is a great question. How did you pick which professor to ask for your reference letters? Um, I decided to choose professors that I knew that I had a good connection with, professors that I met with, whether that was to work on assignments, professors of classes that I regularly spoke out in and participated actively in. It's important that you ask a professor that knows who you are. I think we're grateful in education to be able to have such smaller classes that our professors do get to know us and they get to know our working styles and they get to see our presentations and the way that we are. So that was definitely a bonus. I know I've had many friends kind of go up to their professors at the end of the semester, also kind of just saying, listen, down the line, if I want to apply to a graduate school, would you be interested in writing a letter of reference for me? So kind of making connections like that. If it's not something you see in your direct future, just kind of establishing, I've been in your class, I did well in your class, I've participated a lot. Would you be, if I could email you down the line? Um, Obviously, don't pick a professor that you did poorly in their class. They might not have such high things to say about you. Don't pick a professor that maybe you've showed up late to their class or skipped a lot of their class of. Again, you want to demonstrate that you were a really strong student and that they can say positive things about you. Um, so yeah, it was just picking professors that I worked really well with and that I really enjoyed their class, that even when I was asking them, I had high things to say about. I really like studying this material. I really enjoyed when you talked about this. This really was a passion of mine.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. Like laying that foundation, especially that tip about like maybe you're not sure about applying now, but you might in the future. It's good to give people a heads up so that you're on their radar and they remember who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can even do this with like your supervisors for your field experiences. I know my friend reached out to her supervisor afterwards. Yeah, it was the McGill supervisor. And even they're still in contact to this day because right now she didn't look into pursuing a master's right after we graduated, but she knew that down the line she might want to. And this is someone that had great things to say about her and her work experience and the output that she did during the field experience. And so it's important to kind of like establish these connections throughout your academic and work journey.
Yeah. And I like what you said as well about like participating in class and that kind of thing. That makes you a lot more memorable. So if you're joining us in, your second or third year for the session, you now know Tiana's wisdom of like, making yourself known to your course instructors. It's really easy at McGill, especially to kind of fly under the radar and keep to yourself in your classes and still do well. But I think the way you're going to have strong recommendation letters is to really have discussions and get to know your course instructors and professors. And especially in education, they're generally very nice people. So they'll be happy to chat a little bit after class.
Mhm. So the next question I have is, have you been a TA and do I know people that have been TAs balancing being a TA with grad school and how do you become one? So I have not been a TA, but I have applied for the winter semester to be a TA, but I do have lots of friends that have been in the past year. And there are various TA positions that are offered with various different hours based on what you're looking for. I know that this was a great option for some of my friends that are international students because they've had a hard time kind of finding a job here, whether that's with their work visas or even just the French language that's kind of impacted them. So being a TA offers kind of a steady employment throughout the semester. And since it's directly with McGill, if you are an international student, it kind of works in with your study visa. You apply directly through, I want to say, actually, we just got an email about more TA positions. Let me check. It's through my workday with McGill. So we actually get emails from the grad coordinator. He sends us regularly when a new TA position opens up. So you will be notified when those become available. And it's a very straightforward application. You just kind of highlight your specific research interests and kind of hope that aligns with the course that you're applying for. There are so many different courses that offer different positions, and even there's different options of whether you want to be a teaching assistant. Maybe that's more of an active role of participation within the class. Maybe you're hosting office hours. Maybe you're running conferences, depending on what department you're in, or you could just apply to be a grader. So that's just kind of grading assignments, and that can be done kind of on your own time to an extent. Maybe you're going to have like a week where it's really busy, you're grading a lot of essays, but then a couple weeks go by and you're pretty free of work. So it is very it's easy to kind of balance with grad school life for sure.
I have a quick one that I'll
Mhm.
maybe just answer super fast. Someone's asking when the applications open. So typically the applications open about a year in advance. So you do have to be prepared, and that's why I mentioned some students are already kind of preparing their documents and thinking about their personal statement over the summer months, because the U Apply portal, at least for McGill, opens in mid-September, usually around September 15th. And that's when you can start submitting your documents and that kind of thing. The deadlines at McGill range anywhere from even for for med school, for kind of those really competitive professional programs like law, they often close November 1st. But for the Faculty of Education programs, they close anywhere between December and end of January. So oftentimes it's January 1st or January 15th. So that gives you a few months to prepare your application and to put things in there, but the application portal does open in September for the following September. So you do have to be ready like a year in advance. Sometimes certain programs accept students what's called off cycle. So they might accept students to start in winter or in spring. But you're going to have to, again, take a look, ask those admissions people, hey, do you accept off-cycle applications, or do you just accept students once a year for a September start?
Mhm. So I have another question that's a bit more EduS geared. Hey, Jules. Um, so asking someone to be a reference kind of demonstrate to write about your experience on council. I know I was asked to write a couple reference letters because I was president for several VPs, and I was happy to do that. I also asked some faculty members that I worked closely with at in the education department to write some letters for me as well. So depending on who you're working close with in your role, I would kind of go to them, whether that's your president or someone else that you're working with in the department. Definitely.
Yeah, I just wrote one for
Nice.
someone on council last year, who I worked with closely. So it's definitely possible to ask people who aren't necessarily professors or teachers in the field or that kind of thing. I have a question here, Tiana, about scholarships or bursaries or that kind of thing. I know right now that at least Quebec residents that are in Bachelor of Education programs, because there's a teacher shortage in Quebec, are getting, I believe, a $2,500 bursary per year to help finance their studies. Do you know if that applies to graduate studies as well?
I wouldn't know because I'm not a Quebec resident.
Okay,
Mhm.
fair
But
enough.
I know that the thesis option does receive some funding just for any applicants. Um, yeah, I
That's
don't know
okay.
too much about Quebec residents.
It's possible, again, to kind of reach out to admissions or our student recruitment associate and ask. So I'm going to put her email in the chat, and you can email her and ask about those bursaries or funding opportunities. Okay.
Um,
We have about
yeah,
5 minutes left, so maybe another question or two.
yeah. So you do need to write a letter of intent, whether it's coursework or thesis based. Yes. Um, Being a TA, you don't need to be a TA throughout your graduate studies. It's more so just to give you more experience with academics, with the university, and just also to gain work experience if you're not already being a teacher on the side or doing another kind of job. I know that I really want to be a TA just to kind of get my foot in the door with the university and just kind of take a look at what it would be like to kind of run a university class. Maybe that's something I want to do if I pursue a PhD, whether that's be a course lecturer or something like that. And I want to work closely with more professors and kind of see the work that they do. And I did not have any practicum for my master's. It's just thesis. So I did courses last year, and now I'm currently doing research and working on writing my thesis.
I'm going to
From
double
what I
check with you.
understand,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Education in Society and Educational Leadership, those two master's programs don't have a practicum. It is just coursework and thesis if you decide that option or a project. The practicums are more for the teacher certification programs. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone would be eligible for the Masters of Arts in Teaching and Learning because it's like a graduate level version of the B.Ed program and has a lot of the same components. But if you were applying to that one would be one that's called a professional because you're doing um, those field experiences, or in the MHL, they're called internships,
Mhm,
to get that practical teaching experience that you need to get your Quebec teaching license.
mhm.
Or something like speech language pathology or physical therapy or medicine. Those would all be considered professional graduate programs because you're getting prepared for a particular type of profession. Or counseling, I guess, would be one as well.
Mhm. Okay.
I did a quick search to see if the bursary, the prospective bursary is available for graduate students at McGill, and it doesn't seem like it is. It seems like it's reserved for those programs that are leading to teacher certification, so the Bachelor of Education or the Masters of Arts in Teaching and Learning.
Okay.
So it wouldn't count for the other graduate programs that are available at McGill.
I mean, I also discovered this year that the EMSB pays for the courses of teachers that go on to pursue a master's degree. So that's something I've kind of been working on getting some reimbursement for, where they pay for the standard course fee. They're not fully paying my tuition to do the master's, but since I am employed by the EMSB, they're paying for some of my courses, which is an option if maybe you're looking to teach and do the master's as well. It was something that wasn't necessarily advertised to me, but once I found out about it, it's just been like a great support.
All right. I
Also, do
think
they,
we covered everything. If we haven't, then make sure you double check and send it either to myself or Tianna.
yeah, I'm gonna put my email in the chat. If you have any questions, honestly, I'm so happy to receive emails, and I'm happy to help and answer more questions if you guys have any.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I really enjoyed the back and forth and the discussion, and thank you especially to Tianna for giving us some time this evening. I'm sure you have a busy schedule, but it's been great to hear from you and your perspective on graduate studies, especially here at McGill, which is a popular choice for our students.
Thank you so much for organizing this. This was so wonderful, and I wish everyone the best of luck in their applications.